Happy Sunday. Has 2021 been better for you than 2020? Are you just so grateful we're here? Yay! I know. It's funny being part of having been drafted quite forcefully into the movement this summer. Even I didn't expect that we would end up here. As a former scholar of transitioning economies, notably Russia, some of this revolution stuff, some of this coup stuff looked familiar. And a lot of the warning signs that are here have been here for a while. The difference is that in the United States, we have this thing called privilege that does exist in other countries, but not quite to the same extent. So that when this type of mass unrest finally boils to the surface, a lot of people haven't seen it before. It's new. This is not, it is an old simmering tension, but it's one that we like to believe we had put behind us completely, despite all evidence to the contrary that has been thrown up every few years since 2010. If not longer back, to be perfectly honest, you could draw a straight line back to Rodney King. So with that, I've been getting a lot of questions this week. And so what I'm doing in this series of interviews, I'm doing as a mother, as a coach, as a protest mom, and as someone who has watched the Queen one too many times. So I thought I'd reach out to some of the experts, the people I know in my purview and my network, the people I studied crumbling economies with, the people I studied Eastern Europe, the rise and fall with, the people who I know best and I trust to tell me what they think will be next. And tonight, I should bring to you, the very first in this series, someone that I am proud to call a friend, but not really a very old friend because she's really young. She's disgustingly young, absurdly young, and has accomplished more in her short time on this earth than I could even hope to dream of. Lind-Guzik is a writer, a scholar, and someone who knows something about authoritarianism, a Russian Jew who immigrated, whose father immigrated to the United States a long time ago and brought some of the best and the worst of the old country home with him. She's experienced firsthand different types of oppression. She knows something about narcissism, misogyny, and how much human capital can actually be wasted while everybody looks the other way, as long as things are good for them. She also happens to have a degree in comparative law from Harvard, where she continues to and teaches. Sorry, she does not continue to teach at Harvard. She's now based in New York City. And when Trump was elected, she saw this coming a lot sooner than anyone else in my purview did. And to that extent, founded a think tank called The Conversationalist, which is an ongoing series of essays produced every Friday about totalitarianism, authoritarian regimes, how to survive them, and how to interpret what's happening around you when it feels so close because it's right on your TV, yet so distant because it does not impact your day-to-day. With no further ado, hopefully she shared this in all of her pertinent Facebook groups and is ready to go. I bring you Lind-Guzik. Hello there. Oops, there we go. Hi. Oh, you went mute again. There we go.
Can you hear me?
I can now. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, hold on. No, that's not. Sorry about this. Slight audio trouble.
I know. It's fun playing with systems. It really is.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yay. So did I get your pedigree right? I know it's very important for poodles.
Yes. My background, I have been worried about Trump's election since before Trump was elected. And I was concerned at the very possibility of Trump being elected because I have seen this movie before. I had watched democratic decline happen in Russia, in Turkey. We've seen democratically elected autocrats take power in India, in Brazil. This is a global trend. And I did not think that the United States was exempt from that trend. And so I founded The Conversationalist. We publish global feminist takes on the news, and we have had an anti-authoritarian focus since the beginning. we felt like there was a gap, particularly due to American exceptionalism, which is, this idea that it can't happen here. And I wanted to say, well, it happened. It already happened. So yeah, we've been doing that now for several years. And so that's sort of, and I've got a background, MK already spoke about it pretty extensively, my academic background in Russian history, comparative law, human rights, censorship, propaganda, all the things that make for a successful authoritarian regime.
So before we get to a successful authoritarian regime, what does it take to have a successful coup? Because the big thing that's been floating around Twitter and what prompted the series of conversations I wanted to have is the fear from people who are not academics, who are not scholars, who have not looked at this before, and who've never experienced it firsthand, or have just been too busy, frankly, with their own stuff to remember, really, Milosevic was bad, but where was he and why? And rather than shame anyone for that, because life has been really hard recently, I want to sort of present it a little bit differently because these words are foreign and scary. So the thing that's floating on Twitter says, like, in 1923, Hitler had his first coup. And then in 1933, he rose to power. And the current chatter would have you think, look, every unsuccessful coup is led immediately and directly by a successful coup. So what's happening in 2 weeks is rise of Hitler. And I'm like, I want to speak to that.
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the things that even academics cannot agree about are the definitions for fascism, the definitions for coup, the definitions for insurrection. So the terms that coup and insurrection have both been used to describe what happened in the Capitol on Wednesday. And the difference between them is that a coup, attempted or otherwise, generally involves the security forces. So the military primarily, but it doesn't necessarily have to involve the military. It can be other political factions, but it is a violent overthrow of government. And an insurrection, as opposed to a coup, is generally referred when you've got a populist uprising, when it's citizens who are rebelling to overthrow the government. In my opinion, we had a bit of both. No, I do not think Trump will remain in the White House on January 20th. The fact that 10 defense secretaries came out on the day before the insurrection coup to say that this was unacceptable was important. We can get to why they timed it that way, because that's an interesting question. But we're still waiting to hear and to find out the results of the investigation. So we don't know exactly what happened. But what we do know is that, that Republicans, and I say Republicans on purpose, because this is not just a Trump issue, this is a GOP issue. The corruption is widespread, and enabling authoritarianism is authoritarianism. I don't make the distinction. But groups of civilians, including some, off-duty local police from all over the country, planned online openly to protest and perhaps even storm the Capitol. Like, it was not a secret that white nationalists were planning an attack on January 6th. The question becomes, why were the Capitol Police the only people there to push back on this? They were understaffed, they were overwhelmed, and in some cases were taking selfies, right? So we have to question the extent to which people in the government were involved in planning this attack. So I don't think it's appropriate to completely write off the term coup, because holding back the National Guard, refusing help to the Capitol Police, allowing these people time to enter the Capitol and search for Congress people, the line of succession, to try and harm them. They threaten to kill them. We take these seriously. There were pipe bombs placed at the DNC, the RNC, at the Capitol. We got to take that seriously. But we can relax a little bit about the fact that the military did not sign on to this.
Into Washington. I mean, when I think it could have been worse, I think of other countries where that literally happened. Tanks in Red Square, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when we talk about successful coups. Oftentimes, that's what you need a military involvement to overthrow. That said, as much as I feel like this transition is going forward. It's not peaceful. It was clearly not peaceful, but the transition appears to be going forward on January 20th. I'm still very worried about further attacks. I anticipate there will be more terrorism, more hate crimes. I am very concerned about the radicalization of Republican voters. That I believe there was a statistic that 70% of Republican voters believe that Trump won the election. That is a very concerning statistic. There is a concern that they've built this new lost cause. And when I talk about lost cause, I'm referring to the Confederacy's loss. That was the original one. And now that they've built a new sort of white supremacist narrative around the stolen election, that's not going anywhere. So.
Right. So I want to be clear on one point, because the people who are going to, a lot of people who are watching this consider themselves to be leftists. They would absolutely agree that Republicans, that the Republican Party has work to do and some problems with things they don't like, but they feel very similarly about the Democrats particularly when it comes to corruption. Now, granted, we're not seeing anything like this type of insurrection, but has this become a blueprint for what we can expect to see each time? Is this now a line that we've crossed? And since we've crossed it, it's acceptable and normalized?
Yes, we have. We've crossed a lot of lines. The fact that they contested the election is bad news for us going forward, because every election that happens next, there's the potential. It's fair game, right? That people can say, we didn't lose, and just bear down on propaganda and conspiracy theories. And have a very receptive base that is going to agree with them. And one of the things that's very frightening is how closed the conservative infosphere is, and how extreme it's become, and how completely divorced from mainstream media it has become. And we don't have influence over them in that respect.
Because I know a lot of people who will be engaging with this live stream, for example, probably tapped out of Facebook, Twitter, and not just the mainstream media, but like cable news. They stopped news consumption altogether, barring a few newsletters that would deliver headlines to their inbox or breaking news to their inbox when Trump was elected, because things got so ugly. Do you think it seems to me, and I'm you as a professor, it seems harder to deliver a whole story broadly right now.
It is. I feel like the media is so segmented. I also quit cable after the election. The talking heads on there, for the most part, felt to me like they were missing the point, and looking at this crisis too narrowly. Again, the crisis is not just about whether Biden will enter the White House on January 20th. The problem is the widespread radicalization of the Republican Party, of Republican voters, and a rejection of democratic norms and a rejection of democratic legitimacy. That they will not concede that Biden won is a problem. And I worry about GOP-run state legislatures. I'm like, okay, they've lost the executive. The best news of late was, Democrats win in Georgia and Perdue and Loeffler's concessions. It was not a given that they would have conceded the Senate. So I'm glad for that. I always look for, will they concede? But white supremacy in America is as old as America. It's got a very ancient history. It is within our institutions. And there is no easy solution. There just isn't. We will probably be dealing with some form of rebellion, some form of extremism for years to come. That's my guess.
One of the theories that I heard a long time ago about Americans becoming so complacent about war and military spending is it doesn't hit us in the household the way that it did during the Vietnam era, when everybody you knew was deeply, deeply troubled about a child who was abroad. So now we feel so divorced from it that it's not affecting our day-to-day, that we are not on a personal level bought into it, that it's easy to ignore it. And I have to wonder, is that kind of where we are now with the white supremacy that so many still don't seems exaggerated or extreme, or doesn't begin to exist? I have bear traps around my house that we put out at night. And I mean, I know I haven't told that story until right before Christmas, because I understand how bonkers it absolutely sounds to someone who's like, it's one of those things, and I get it that I'm kind of more out there than most people. Did she make that up? Did that really happen? Either way, I don't want to know. Let's back away from MK. Then that truly is my big fear. When you see that this is real, are you going to continue to back away from this, double down on your comfort?
If Democrats don't ditch bipartisanship, we're in real trouble. We need to make hard boundaries, and white people need to step up and take hard boundaries with the racists in their lives. That's one of the biggest problems, is that white people don't understand or know other white people. They underestimate them and don't want to have the hard conversations. They need to have the hard conversations. You need to draw a line. You need to say this is not acceptable. And there needs to be social consequences. There need to be economic consequences. There need to be political consequences. One of the biggest things we can push for right now is prosecution of the people who took part in this attempted overthrow of the government. They have to be prosecuted. As someone who studied transitional justice, and my family, I should mention, survived the Nazis themselves. I come from Soviet Jews who came over here in the 70s, one of the things that I grew up with was some fun intergenerational trauma from World War II, but also this idea that you don't wait to find out how bad the Nazis are going to be. You just don't wait. My grandmother took my father and my aunt on a cow train out of Odessa right before they arrived, and everyone who stayed was shot. So had she stayed to find out, I wouldn't be here. So I'm glad she was an alarmist. Basically, I'll just say that. I'm glad she was an alarmist, because there was something to be alarmed about. Fascism is alarming. Fascism doesn't believe in bipartisanship. This movement, their goal is a white Christian theocracy. The strongest base for Trump are white evangelicals. They are extreme. They have been radicalized for years. They are organized. They vote. We out-organized them with Biden and with Georgia. And we need to keep doing that. But we also, again, need to set a hard line, and prosecute the people who were involved. You have to. Otherwise, again, people aren't completely crazy to say that they will regroup and come back and do this once more. Because when you don't provide consequences, when there are when you're not going to jail for storming the Capitol, you're getting emboldened to do it again. Again, do I think this is going to overthrow the government in a week? No. Do I think he's going to do significant damage in the next 10 days if he's not removed immediately? Yes. Do I think that his personality cult is going to disappear overnight? No. Do I worry about the next leader that's going to come up to represent this movement? Absolutely. But there are things we can do. So obviously, you guys know you can protest and you can organize and you can vote. Even, I know people are disappointed with Democrats. I'm very disappointed with Democrats. I don't think that they have taken this seriously enough. I think they're still relying on collegiality with people that would eat them alive.
And maybe you think from that, and I always think that's very white. They're trusting the system to work.
The institutions don't hold. That's what any expert in authoritarianism will tell you. The institutions don't hold. So, and yes, they're planning more attacks. They haven't been subtle about it. That our federal government has been ignoring right-wing extremism for years. For decades, even, people have been pointing out the, right-wing terrorism left and right, but it's mostly online activists that are doing a lot of this work. And that's one of the most discouraging things that we've seen, right, is how little the federal government has done to combat white supremacy. They're complicit in it in a lot of ways. And like I said, we're going to wait to find out once this is investigated, exactly who was involved when and who knew what when. But it's appearing likely that there were people in government who were part of this. This was not, that's why I'm saying, again, to circle back, not just an insurrection. When the police is involved, when you have Trump going to the border this week to, I'm sure, incite violence against migrants, when he's got ICE and the Border Patrol on his side, when he has police departments on his side, we've got a big fight ahead of us. And the best thing you can do is look at it clearly, acknowledge that it's bad and it's going to take a while for it to get better, and that a lot of this isn't new. It's just new to the people who haven't had skin in the game till now.
And even a week before, I've been saying, like, there's any woman who's ever been stalked or abused and has tried to ask for help unless the perpetrator has been Black or a person of color, generally speaking, when you're turning in a white man, there's a tendency to discredit, like, find some other way to get back at your boyfriend is something I've heard recently. Not from my home situation, to be really clear, we're good. I work with a lot of the IPV victims through my work at the Blue Bench and elsewhere in the community. But that's a common refrain of, oh, it's not that bad because we are good with women being in danger, because we are the danger to the fabric of society. It seems to be, from a legal perspective, is anything that would infringe on the rights of a white man specifically. And last week we saw that bomber, for Christmas Day, the bomber in Nashville, 18 months before his girlfriend had called with the police, the FBI, both. I think it was federal. I should have checked up on that. She'd at least alerted federal authorities in some manner that, hey, he's building a bomb in the RV.
And they gave her a psych test.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, I'm glad you brought up domestic violence, because I'm also like a child abuse survivor. And my opinion is that authoritarianism is interpersonal abuse on an institutional level. And that the way that you break other people, the way you manipulate and propagandize and control people is the same in the home as it is in the White House. So,
and if you haven't done therapy, you don't recognize the cycle. You just move to protect yourself and your family as much as possible, shield yourself from it, rather than blame the abuser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
hide.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are a lot of ways that people try to normalize and minimize abuse because it makes them feel more in control. I think that's what you're seeing from the Democrats largely, is this inability to recognize that they're playing defense when they should be playing offense, rather. This reluctance to use hard power by Democrats is unacceptable. As bad as they are, at the same time, we're reliant on them. We have a two-party system, and they're the big tent. They're the ones that listen. Do they listen effectively, and do they translate that into policy? Often not, right? But on the other hand, you have fascists. So those are your options right now. We can, work to fix those. But for now, this is sort of this immediate crisis is more concerning.
So what would you say to the people? I've been here like screaming forever, like, okay, the protests are only going to happen for a short period of time in the streets. After that, we got to take over the halls of power. I'm at city council every Monday night. I'm that nutcase mom who's just screaming from the rafters, cursing at them and live streaming, behaving as badly as I possibly can. Granted, which is white privilege at work, but also just trying to get people to engage and say, this is the rubber stamp on the things that do impact us as we get rid of the communities around us are marginalized. Yet so many have come to the left because the system either chewed them up in some way, failed them in some way, and they feel completely disassociated from the process. My argument is that as long as we're in this two-party system, we got to work it as hard as we can while we push for change. But what would you say to the people who are like, I'm tired of pushing. I shouldn't have to convince anyone that I deserve to live any longer?
You shouldn't. You're right. You shouldn't have to, but we right now don't have much of a choice, unfortunately. That's what I would say. I feel for you, and it's valid. And yet, the minute we stop caring, then we stop pushing back, is the fascists aren't stopping, and they will take that power vacuum and they will use it to their advantage to crush us further. And so we don't have a choice. We did not pick this fight, but we're in it. And the right is not backing off. A couple of things that caught my eye recently is Pennsylvania refusing to seat the elected Democrat, and throwing Fetterman, the lieutenant governor, out of the chambers. I'm worried about more activity like that. I'm obviously worried about more voter suppression efforts, local voter suppression laws. I'm worried about the fact that the RNC, the day after they stormed the Capitol, doubled down on Trump. And we're arguing like, great, we're going to have him campaign for us in 2022. They're not coming back to the planet anytime soon. A lot of state GOP leaders have come out as pro-Trump since the coup attempt. So they're not going away, no matter how much we want them to. And even once he's out of office, he's still going to have some force. And so we have to fight back. We have to. It's existential.
What does specifically look like?
It looks like contesting every position, locally, on the state level, on the federal level. It means running for things. It means petitioning your local government. It means getting Republicans out of office. It means defunding the police. It means all the things that a lot of you are probably already doing, talking to your representatives, getting in the streets, getting mad, boycotts, all of the tools that people use to fight power.
Oh, I love hearing that. All lanes of the revolution.
Use everything you got, because the nihilism helps them.
Yeah.
The nihilism is theirs, right? That's when things lose meaning, we stop fighting for justice, and that's not okay, because maybe we can afford to, as individuals, can afford to step back and survive, but a lot of people can't, and we've seen that already. We had 4,000 people a day dying of COVID recently. That is not by accident. That is deliberate neglect by the GOP. You don't get into the dire situation we're in with no health care, no, unemployment benefits held hostage. The real way to break down this white supremacist movement would be to give people a social safety net. So fighting for leftist policies is important. And just shutting down white grievance everywhere you go, because it's nonsense.
Oh my God.
And but also, again, take them seriously. Believe that they believe it.
So I remember the last time there was a failed coup in Eastern Europe, laughing about it with some friends, saying, well, obviously this wasn't going to work, because think about how much is required to usurp a nation. It might have been easier then, when you didn't have everything under password protections with double and triple types of layers of security. But do you think it is possible that anyone could, the opposition, what would it take before they've reached that critical mass where this could be a thing?
Well, I mean, geographically, America is very large and very varied. And so in that sense, we're hard to take over federally, and that's a good thing. Our federal system having all these powers devolved to the states is important. That being said, there are these now pockets of GOP-run legislatures that are going to cause trouble for everybody. So do I think there's going to be a federal takeover? No, I think that's very hard in America. I don't see how you do that without the military, and thankfully they have not wanted to get involved. It's sad that we even have to be talking about it. It speaks to the democratic erosion already. This is not a conversation about a healthy democracy. And they will continue to attack Biden's legitimacy systematically. That's not going to end. They're not going to come around to his win. You can throw that idea out the window. It's not happening. But yeah, I guess, I mean, my big worry is someone that's not Trump, because he's an old guy by now. So I don't expect he'll have all of the energy in 4 years. But someone the other day mentioned Tucker Carlson's tutu. I don't want to jinx it, but he's got he could do it. Someone with the audience.
Do it.
I mean, she's less of a speaker. You know what I mean? I don't think the crowds are going to follow her in the same way, but they need someone with charisma. They need someone who's younger and shinier and more polished to lead this movement. And it will be dangerous. And if we don't have these examples of prosecutions, if we don't have these examples of consequences, it's going to be a lot harder to overcome.
So just want to be clear too, since it's known that I'm an abolitionist and I want the entire carceral system gone. While we have it, we have to use it against white people for things like this. I will say I'd be happier if we didn't have it, but today's not the day to dismantle it completely. Else, what would be taking it over?
I mean, if we don't fight authoritarianism, we won't have elections. They will be a farce. We're not there yet. That's a great thing. It could be worse. It could be worse. It is very bad, but it could be worse. Let's not let it get that much worse, right? We want to keep our right to vote. We want it to be counted.
We want our elections to be valid.
Yeah, and we want to exactly, have some sort of certification and reality. You've got to assert it somewhere.
I mean, you don't gotta. But
if you want to get them on inciting violence against the government to overthrow it, then you've gotta. Fair. But we want that. And watch Ted Lasso for a couple of days as self-care, you ain't got to deal with reality. You can do a Ted Lasso for a few days. It's good. Did you just watch it? Oh, I've watched it now twice, I think. So, yeah.
We just finished binging it. I was like, oh, that was what we needed. That's so, how I do English accents after 7 years in Hong Kong. I'm like, I hear them, I get irrationally angry. I'm not one of those Americans who's like, oh, it sounds so college. I'm like, ah! I didn't think I would like that show as much as I did, and I absolutely loved it. So.
Oh, yeah. No, it's got the optimism we need right now. I choose to be optimistic. I choose to have hope, despite the fact that things are bad.
I gotta say,
but it's true. I do. I choose it. I mean, I have spent so much time studying all these morbid, awful sort of breakdowns of society. I've always been very curious about how bad people get very ordinary people to do crimes and mass crimes, because that's what's sort of capable right now. That's one of the bigger worries, right? Is violence, but at the same time, I've also seen like the pushback there. That we've had some wins. You know, it hasn't been all bad. That we got him out in one term is remarkable. Mm-hmm. That I did not. I mean, I hoped.
I didn't think it would happen.
I hoped it, but I had it not been for the pandemic, I think he would have won. Had he sent out checks, he would have won. I mean, there were a lot of ways he could have won. The nice thing about authoritarianism is that they shoot themselves in the foot a lot. Before anyone tells you that they're not authoritarian because they're competent, authoritarians are never competent. Like, they have bad information. It's run based on fear and reaction. This is not wise policy making. This is not four-dimensional chess. They're much better at spoiling other people's good time than they are at building anything themselves.
I gotta say, your former classmate at Duke, Stephen Miller, I don't know, he seems pretty organized. Everything I've read is like,
oh, absolutely. No, I mean, yes. Stephen Miller is a nightmare. And he's like, when I saw that Trump was going to the border, my first thought was, oh, Stephen Miller's doing that because he knows what he's doing. Bannon also knew what he was doing. There was a reason Bannon called himself a Leninist. And that's because he wanted to destroy the institutions from the inside. He just wanted to take over and then eradicate them. He's had a lot of success. Not Bannon personally, but like putting all of the people that Trump put in charge of all of the agencies to destroy them and to, counteract any sort of positive regulation whatsoever. That worked really well. People keep wondering, where is the federal response to any of this? I'm like, well, you've got a lot of political appointees and a lot of crappy judges and a 6-3 Supreme Court. And they have been, for the last 4 years, they have installed their people all over the place. If I had my way, we would remove every single person who was in any way involved with the Trump regime. I will not get that. That's part of the problem. But we do our best.
So 2 legal questions. One, I've heard that the reason all of these cabinet appointees have been resigning is because their vote would be required to enact the 25th Amendment.
Yes.
So is that possible for that? Do you think that would happen, that would be invoked? 1, and 2, can Trump pardon himself?
No, I don't think Trump can pardon himself. And yes, I do think that the cabinet resignations had to do with the 25th Amendment so that they couldn't. Relying on Republicans to self-regulate is a waste of time. Expecting Republicans to do the right thing, waste of your time. They're not helping us. They're on his side. They are one. They are the same. They're not coming around. All the people who have come out against them for the most part have been retired. Like, this is not people with power. On the contrary, he has a significant portion of sitting Republicans on his side. So yeah, that's not happening. Wait, asking Mike Pence to do the right thing, like, come on. But they are going to bring the impeachment articles tomorrow, as far as I know. So
to where they're on recess?
They're back tomorrow on Monday.
Oh, I misunderstood. Okay, I thought I had been reading. That goes to show information's everywhere.
I mean, we were upset that they took the weekend off, and then I read that, the House rules requiring that unanimous consent in order to convene on the weekend. And Kevin McCarthy, who, has come out in support of Trump's coup, was like, no, we shouldn't, and, objected. So Democrats are very bad at communicating about Republican obstruction. Which is a big problem. They don't know how to blame the Republicans for the things that Republicans are responsible for, which is very frustrating.
I mean, it's hard to get anyone to listen when you're saying a white man tried to hurt me. So, I mean, I kind of get it, but I'm hoping that this will be the point where it finally changes.
Yeah. But I guess I agree with you, but I also think there's a hesitancy on their part, in part because it is a white man. They're like, did he really? Was it that bad?
You sure need to ask it? I mean, both sides. There are two sides to every story. It takes two to tango. No, it doesn't.
There are infinite sides. I hate both sides. There are not, this binary thinking is ridiculous. There are many, many, many sides.
Whenever anyone says there's two sides to every story, you have lost me as a person, as an employee, as a friend, as anyone who's going to like come in your purview. Just the second I hear that phrase, I've kind of laughed people out of my life just for using it because I was like, oh, you just spoke. That's not being neutral or fair and balanced.
Yeah, it's triggering. You have to
it's not good. And bruises around your neck, but we really need to hear what he has to say before we can reconcile. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, we don't. We, like I said, don't wait for the Nazis.
Don't wait for the Nazis.
Don't wait for them. They're coming. They have announced it. They have been telegraphing their intentions. Trump has not been subtle. MAGA has not been subtle. They have said that they want to be forever president for a long time. It was just everyone else's disbelief at what they were saying because it seemed so extreme. And I'm like, well, when a malignant narcissist is telling you he wants to take over everything, you should take that at face value.
Well, when Putin tried to run for the third term and got things changed so he could come back and do it, how would you compare this to that sort of scenario?
To which scenario?
So when Putin came back, you remember in Russia, it was like you can only have two consecutive, and then he came back and was like, got it changed. Like change forever president.
I don't see that happening here. There's no Medvedev to take over, you know. So.
Again, but just to be clear who the Medvedev was. Again, when we think about like the elements of a coup to be successful, you don't just need the military. You need several insiders who are also pushing for this in the same way in a system that is inherently new or unstable.
Yeah. And also, like, we haven't talked about the press, but we do still have a press that covers the president and covers corruption. They do it inadequately, in my opinion, because they soft-foot it around, again, white supremacy. They don't want to call racist. It's interesting. They in trying to empathize, they tend to condescend. So they don't even get to know the people in the opposition. They pretend to. It's a disaster. Yeah. So, but we're not Russia. No. So we're not Russia, and that matters. Again, like it can always be worse. And a lot of the places where the coups are more successful, the press has been decimated in a way that hasn't happened here. That said, you know, in America, we have practically a corporate monopoly on media, which has led to some self-censoring. So even though we do have a free press, there are a lot of taboos that have done a huge disservice to Americans because they're not informed. The press missed the radicalization of the GOP, which is, you know, the biggest story. Yeah. This was not a polarization issue. This was a radicalization issue. And again, this is why I started the Conversationalist. You guys should check us out. We're at conversationalist.org. We have an amazing archive. Our most recent piece actually was from a Bosnian political scientist who wrote about what it was like growing up in Sarajevo with Milosevic, and how people also did not take him seriously. Until
that would have happened. What, Milosevic came to power in 1989?
Oh God, I don't remember the exact year.
Not that it matters. So just in 1989, I was in 5th grade, 6th grade. So I wouldn't have been paying attention back then.
Yeah.
Most people would. You don't know Milosevic, if that name, Sarajevo, Bosnia, none of this is like gelling. What's the quick story on that?
So it's that, you know, he came to power in Yugoslavia at the time, was communist, but outside of the Soviet Union. He came in wanting to make Serbia great again. By taking over the different regions and persecuting religious minorities, and then lots of mass shooting and mass rapes and really, really ugly atrocities, the Bosnian War. So again, if you want to actually go read the piece on conversationalist.org, go read this piece about Milosevic. It's got more detail than I can bring here.
No, absolutely. Sometimes it's enough to say this was worse, but no one saw that coming either. They wanted change so badly, they didn't ask the right question. And that tends to, because I've always said anything that can fall immediately overnight. I like the slow replacement and reconstruction as we go, because there's no guarantee if you eradicate everything overnight that what it will replace it will be better or even different.
Absolutely. Power vacuums are dangerous. There's a reason, for example, why Putin stays in power. Mm-hmm. And it's because people are worried that what comes next is worse. And there's a logic to that.
Yeah.
When you don't have good options, there's a logic to that. Do I agree with it? No, but also, you've got to provide other options if you're going to try and remove an authoritarian. We have those options. Let's be grateful for them. We have to support them, but hold them accountable. And push them to do the right thing. They are more likely to listen to us than the fascists. So
I love that.
Yeah.
That's like a beautiful note to sort of end on. Funny enough, for once I have a silent audience that's not asking a ton of questions. If you guys have any questions for Anna, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We only have her for a few more minutes, but I have a feeling that any question you could possibly ask will be answered over at www.theconversationalist.org, or you could toss them at her at a Lind-Guzik at Twitter. I'm just going to throw your handle down in here. It's
great.
Totally.
Yeah. Conversationalist.org. You can sign up for a newsletter. It's only once a week. We don't harass you too often. And we're putting out analysis that you're not going to find everywhere else. We had, for the last year, an amazing columnist, Chrissy Stroop. She's been writing about evangelical authoritarianism. So, and as an ex-evangelical, and a Russian history PhD. So there are a lot of us. But yeah, we have a lot of really great analysis about authoritarianism, about Nazi mentalities, about Trumpism, about how culture, art, how science, you name it. We've got angles on anti-authoritarianism. So
I love it.
Great.
Love it. Thank you, as always, for your time and for saying smart people things in ways which I can only aspire.
I hope it was helpful. So
It really, but I mean, I really think at some point we need to have an essay on what it was like at Duke with Stephen, with the most embarrassing stories and photos that you can find. I mean,
I personally somehow blanked him out, but my friends all knew of him or knew him, and he was heinous, so, and racist and classist and terrible to the cleaning staff. And if that doesn't tell you everything about him.
Yeah, it's just wild that in any, so many of us, in order to enter these institutions, had to tuck things in. Even my accent, it's still very much a conscious effort to speak without it. But I know exactly what people think when they hear it coming out my mouth unbidden. Mm-hmm. And they have. So the only way to toss off those assumptions was to sound and look like everyone else. So I am fascinated, not just because, white man, but to be who you are and be so ugly, so publicly, so thoroughly, and so consistently.
Yes.
Is horrific, because he wrote a screed, I believe, in the Duke newspaper about a Black student not belonging there. And that student.
Stephen Miller is a true believer. And that's scary. And he's smart and he knows how to go about it, and he's sadistic. And so it's always bad news when you've got a sadist in charge. That's how we ended up with so many, concentration camps on the border. And because this is I know my audience, I was working on asylum cases back under the Obama administration too, when they were doing deportations and raids. So I know this is not a new thing, but it was expanded immensely under Trump, and asylum was basically destroyed. And they've been doing federal executions. He's been on a killing spree. The bloodlust is real.
Yeah.
And Stephen Miller is a great example of it. So
amazing. Asylum has been destroyed. So hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be able to get Christina Brown, local ICE immigration lawyer, working to fight against ICE, and has been here in Denver, where we have like a huge ICE detention facility in Aurora. She has been working tirelessly. And if you follow her Twitter feed, which I believe is C Brown Law LLC, the things that happen on a daily basis never cease to surprise me. But I do hope they end at some point.
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, Trump was going to abuse the people most under his control. And those are federal prisoners and detainees and, immigration. Borders are his special, because that's what the executive has control over. So those were his outlets for abuse. So, yeah.
So go forth with optimism. Watch 2 seasons of Ted Lasso to get there if you have to. Be nice to the cleaning people, because someone is watching.
Yes, absolutely. And because we're all people and we all deserve kindness and dignity and respect. And that's just the basic bare minimum, dignity and respect.
Oh, because we've criticized people for the choices they've made for way too long without critically evaluating the options they had available to them. So that's my key takeaway from you speaking.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We need more.
Context matters.
Context always.
Take it from a historian. Context matters. So,
I love it. You're brilliant. Thank you again so much for your time. And one of the more active things you could do, I'm just going to pull you off the screen here. One of the bigger things you could do if you're looking to fight the power, but are compromised and are unable to leave your home right now, is to take a look at the Working Families Party. I'm a member. Kind of Say Tabaka is as well. We're building up a force out here in the western part of the United States right now. They are predominantly known as the party that supports AOC in the New York City area. If you've heard of Election Defenders in Georgia, that was the Working Families Party. If you're looking for something as far left enough that is Black-led, woman-led, and is the one thing that I do trust that if there are changes that they enact will, in fact, make me safer too, it is with the Working Families Party, www.workingfamilies.org. You can sign up for any of their education sessions, which are free, happen at 5:30 p.m. every single day, learning a little bit more about what you can do to take a more active role in the resistance as time continues. And again, there are many ways you can do this, from phone banking to writing letters to writing emails, reaching out, canvassing, knocking on doors, sharing the word. There are lots of things you can do that do not require you to leave your home ever, and will make a gigantic difference. If you don't believe it, see what they did in Georgia and in other marginalized areas against gerrymandering. Again, you have more power than you think you do. I beg you, if you have some privilege to go along with that power, please use it. Find some way to do it every single day. Thanks again. Always to contact Anna and follow the Conversationalist will be in the footnotes once we go off and I have a chance to update the description, what was happening here. So thank you very, very much. You are coached. You are loved. Let's win this thing. And winning, honestly, is going to be staying sentient and upright throughout.